Welcome back to PD for the Soul, the podcast that nourishes the heart of your practice one episode at a time. I'm your host, Lanisha, and you've made it to season 2. Whether you're catching your breath after a long school year, reflecting on what worked and what didn't, or already dreaming up ways to re-engage with joy and purpose, this space is for you, my friend. This season, we're leaning into capacity and action, what it means to build, protect, and sustain the energy and clarity needed to show up fully for our students and ourselves. Can't forget about that part. You will hear honest conversations with educators who are doing the work, solo episodes that connect practice to purpose, and journal prompts designed to help you move from insight to impact. So if you're ready to reset, reconnect, and reimagine what's possible for your students and your own growth, let's breathe, let's listen, and let's learn together. This is PD for the Soul. Let's begin. Welcome back to PD for the Soul, where we have the conversations educators didn't know they needed, but always deserve. Today's guest, Carmen D. Brown, known as Carmen.D.Brown on Instagram, is here to help us challenge the narrative that teachers have to choose between passion and peace. We're talking about what it really means to cultivate work-life harmony, not balance in the traditional sense, but a flow that allows us to show up fully as a teacher and as a person. Carmen is an educator, a coach, and mindset mentor who specializes in helping teachers redefine their relationship with time, with boundaries, and with identity. If you're closing out the school year feeling depleted, unclear, or stretched too thin, this episode is your gentle call to reflect and your strong encouragement to realign. We're going to dive right in with some foundational and some reflective questions. So what does work-life harmony mean to you, Carmen? And how did your journey with it begin?
So when I think about work-life harmony, I came up with that as opposed to work-life balance, because you hear all these people talking about work-life balance, and everybody strives for work-life balance. However, as a math person, the numbers weren't numbering and the math wasn't mathing. So trying to add up all the hours in a day and make sure everything fits in a way that is balanced, so to speak, it doesn't work. So instead of looking for balance, I really want to encourage people to search for harmony and just to allow things in your life to flow. So my journey began back in 2019. Before that, I was everybody's educator, and my entire identity was that of educator. Yes, I was a boy mom, but that kind of got put to the side. I had at that time, I had a less than 1 year old, and I had a fifth grader at the time. And so yes, I was momming, but really the only thing I was doing was educating. I was an educator through and through, and that was who I was. And it all came to a halt because there was this one day, it was like October 2019, when I had burned myself out completely. And I had an anxiety attack in the middle of the school day. So I had come out of a meeting, and I guess it wasn't the best of meetings, and I didn't really feel supported, and I just was so overwhelmed that I started hyperventilating. I couldn't breathe. My blood pressure at that time was through the roof, and I never had blood pressure issues. So all of a sudden, my blood pressure is through the roof, and my assistant principal says to me, "Girl, come sit in this office right in here with the lights off." Next thing I know, my mother is walking down this long hallway. So here I am, 30 something, and at my big age, they called my mama because they are worried and scared about what's going on with me. And from that moment on, I knew that I had to make a shift. I knew something needed to change. And so that is how we got here. So since then, I've been working on creating systems and making sure that everything that I do aligns with who God has called me to be, so that I can be the educator and the mama and the business owner that I am.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times we are conditioned or have been conditioned to believe that exhaustion is equivalent to excellence or
Mhm.
it is aligned to excellence. How do we begin to unlearn that, to disconnect those ideas?
So you have to look at what first you have to look at your work and the work that you're doing and realize that whether you are prioritizing your own self or whatever you're doing, it is excellence. As long as you're doing it, excellence starts in the heart. It starts with our mind, it starts with our heart. So we can do the work that we need to do. We can do everything again that we need to do with excellence. But excellence doesn't mean that I have to close down the school building. Excellence doesn't mean that I've got to take work home. Excellence doesn't mean that I can't leave my work bag in the car or that I can't even leave my laptop in the school building. Because some of us equate just doing all the things, like you said, with excellence, when really, if we're burning ourselves out and we're trying to do everything, we're doing nothing. And there's no excellence in that.
100%. So I'm thinking back to my first year. I remember my mom telling me, if you don't slow down, girl, you are going to burn yourself out. And I was, again, it was my first year. So I was new. I walked into the classroom at that time, it was called an emergency or permit to teach license because I had a finance background. So I
Mhm.
had to go back and kind of take some additional courses. And going into the classroom, I really did not expect the unfinished learnings to be as wide or as prevalent as they were. So it was a
Mhm.
shock to me. And trying to do all the things at that time, I was teaching ninth grade. So trying to do all the things, and it was a lot. It was
Mhm.
it was a lot. And in high school, we don't really have teams in the same way that we have them in middle school. So really, sometimes you're kind of on an island by yourself. So I
Mhm.
was burning the midnight oil. I was opening the school and I was closing it. I might not have been closing. I probably was the second to last person to leave, but I was there because I wanted to make sure things were done and I was taking care of those kids. But I really want to think about and talk about, like, what are those signs that we should be looking for that are an indication that we're out of alignment with our own needs?
I think first we have to identify what our needs are. So we can't determine if we're out of alignment or even if we're in alignment if we don't know exactly what it is that we need. So I think it starts with some self-reflection. So get out a journal, get out a piece of paper, get out of something that says, and just start writing down what it is that you need or what it is that you want for your life. In order for us to really align with what we want, we got to know what that is. And so starting with that is what is going to help us decide, you know, if we're in alignment. Once you do that, then you can kind of see where things are not lining up with what it is you say that you want. And if they're not lining up with what you want, then those are the signs that you need to do some adjustment.
Okay. Okay. So thinking specifically maybe about setting boundaries, because when I think about things being out of alignment, I think about, just some things you're going to have to say no to, some things you're going to be able to do, but there's going to be some things that you're just going to have to be okay with saying no. And I think for at least the teachers that I know who are super passionate about what it is that they do and super pumped to show up for their students every day, it's hard to say no. It's hard to say no. So when I'm thinking about that, what are some boundary setting strategies that have worked for you or the teachers that you support?
So when we think about setting boundaries, we think about a boundary, we think about keeping people out. But really, boundaries is not keeping people out. Boundaries is keeping your sanity in. So we have to think first, shift the mindset there that just because I'm saying no, that doesn't make me less of a person. That doesn't make me less of an educator. That I'm not harming my kids or my students because I say no, and I'm not harming my colleagues because I say no. I am doing what's best for me. So if I'm not together and I don't have it all together, then the students aren't going to have it all together, or my colleagues aren't going to have it all together, or I'm not going to be able to support them in the way that they need to be supported because mentally I'm not there. So you have to just be okay with saying no. And again, that goes back to deciding what it is that you need in order to feel supported or whatever it is that you need to to be okay so that you can say no to the things that are against that. So here's an example. They talk about me all the time because Miss Brown doesn't show up to after school activities. Well, most after school activities because they have them on Tuesdays. They also have them late night, and I live 30 minutes away from the school. And so, no, I'm not going to be at reading night. No, I'm not going to be at international night. No, I'm not going to be because number one, Tuesdays, my son has rehearsal. I'm a mom first before I'm an educator. Again, my identity had to be rooted in not that of educator, but that of Carmen. And Carmen is a mom before she's a teacher. Or Carmen is a woman before she is a mom, before she is a teacher. But my children, because I want what's best for them, what they need is going to align more and is going to trump me going to certain activities after school because I got to take care of my kids first. So we have to be okay and knowing that we are um, doing what's best for us and doing what's best for those around us by saying no.
This just made me think of a conversation that I had recently with Raquel Hopkins. She's the capacity expert on Instagram. We
Mhm.
had a really, really good conversation just about just building capacity. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I don't want people to hear this and say that I can not plan or I can not be prepared for my kids or I don't have to do any of the requirements of
Mhm.
me to do the bare minimum of my job. I don't want people to hear that because I think sometimes we can listen through
Mhm.
a I'm gonna make it fit me
Yes,
type
yes,
of
yes,
lens or hearing. And so I want to make sure that's not what we're saying. That's not what we're
right.
saying at all. So 100%. So one thing I want to follow up with is how can they begin to separate their sense of worth from their performance in the classroom, and then keeping in mind that again, we're not saying we don't do the bare minimum for our responsibilities in the classroom. How can we do that?
So first, I just want to reiterate what you said. We we can't put even we're gonna do what's best for kids. And like you said, we can't not follow the expectations. We can't not meet those expectations, but we have to do the best that we can to get those things done. Yes, we got a lesson plan. Yes, we have to show up for kids. Yes, we have to prep them for all the things. But that requires having certain systems in place. So just like we have routines, or at least in elementary, because I'm in elementary school. So just like we have routines for our kids, you have a morning routine at home, you have an evening routine at home for yourself. You need those same routines and those same systems in place in school so that you can get those things done. So maybe that means, so I know when I was a classroom teacher, one thing that I loved to do, and I like to talk. So when the school bell rang and my last student was out the door, I was gonna walk around and talk to everybody, making sure everybody was good before I sat down and did what I was supposed to do. One of the reasons why I was the last or almost the last person in the building. But for me, I had to shift that and I had to close my door. I had to make sure that I had everything that I needed to lesson plan. All right, I got my learning targets. All right, now I have my curriculum here. I have any manipulatives that I want to make sure. I have all the activities out. I know exactly what I'm going to do so that when I sit down to plan, I'm not burning myself out doing it. So by the time I started to put these systems in place, where and so in elementary, I was teaching all four subjects. I was teaching language arts, I was teaching math, I was teaching science, I was teaching social studies. I was teaching everything, which means I had to plan for everything. And so at one point, like I'm turning in lesson plan documents, one subject, 17 pages, and I'm just looking at it because I had spent so much, and so that's until, but excuse me, I didn't have systems at that point. But once I started to put those systems in place, and I started to prioritize me and my self care and put those boundaries in place, then that was when my system started to work for me. So then all of a sudden, my 17-page document, I was still turning in. However, it wasn't taking me 4 or 5 hours a week to write one subject. I could sit down and write your math plans in an hour for the week and be done with it. So it's for me, it's about having systems and the systems in place to make sure that the things that you know you need to do, you're doing them. However, your systems support you in getting them done effectively and efficiently.
I'm so glad you brought up systems because what I have learned or observed with supporting teachers is that we can kind of get into one of those situations where we complain about not having enough time, but
Mhm.
then we're not making the best use of our time either. So when you said you go into your room, you know that at this time I'm going to close my door, I'm going to focus, I have a system or something that I'm following to help me kind of put things together. Then when I go home, now I can leave my bag in the car. I can leave my
Mhm.
computer at home because I have focused and I've followed that system and I've seen it through. But I think sometimes we don't always have that in place and we're
Mhm.
not always willing to put the work in on the front end so that next year, next semester, a couple years from now, things are so much easier. And now
Mhm.
we can have a little bit more freedom and flexibility.
And I think that when it comes to creating systems, we have to make sure that, especially for lesson planning, because number one, what irks my nerves a whole lot is when I get on Instagram and I see people complaining about learning targets. That
Mm.
drives me up a wall. But
What are
we
some things that you see?
everybody be hating on the target, talking about the learning target is for the that's just for the principal and the people that come in. But if you used it and you wrote it correctly, then it should actually guide your lesson, which means that if you write it first, that's your whole lesson plan right there. Which means that in 10 minutes, I could have the whole week of the whole, not the whole week, but I could have a day's worth of lesson plans once I have that learning target written. So it irks my nerves. But once we have our learning targets written and we build our lessons based on those learning, that's another thing I see. People want to go on sites like Teach Pay Teachers or Pinterest and find these pre-written learning targets, but those learning targets aren't meant for your babies. So once we write our own learning targets built for our kids, that's going to drive that lesson planning process so that we can write more effective, more efficient lesson plans.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to take a step to because I asked that question a little prematurely, but now that we've kind of talked about like the boundaries, kind of a little bit of the identity piece of that, and just making sure we're taking care of business.
Mm-hmm.
Now I want to talk about because there are a lot of passionate teachers out there who can give it their all, and
Mm-hmm.
then when they do not see the performance or those outcomes that they had anticipated, now that's their ego. There's a lot of things that are taking a hit. So
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about how can we separate the sense of worth from the performance in the classroom.
Okay, so first of all, my favorite thing to say, and I've been saying it a lot lately, especially because we're in testing season here. We just started state testing. And so one thing that I've been telling my teachers is that failure is feedback. So if your babies are not performing the way that you think that they should perform based on the lesson and the things that you have done, we need to use that as feedback. So we're going to give a summative assessment, right? At the end of a unit, or we're going to give a formative assessment at the end of a lesson. And that formative assessment is going to give us data to show us how we need to address the strategy. Same thing at the end of an assessment. And so we just need to use that as feedback to say, hey, okay, something didn't work right here. So I need to adjust the strategy just a little bit. And it's not really failure. If you think about it, it's data, it's feedback. It just gives me some more information about where I need to go and where I need to change things up a little bit. I think that is a mindset shift that kind of separates that identity piece. Also, you got to remember who you are. I think a lot of us have been made to feel by the education system that we're just a number, that we are our test scores, and you are not a number. You are not just a number. Just like we say our kids are not just a number. You are not just a number. You are not just the test scores that you get. You are so much more than that. And we have to remember that we are so much more than that. And we got to remember who we are when it comes to this data.
Mm. So we got to remember who we are when it comes to the data, because failure is feedback. I like
Yep.
that. Failure
Failure is
is
feedback.
feedback. That's a hashtag right there. I like that a lot. And one thing I want to add on is when you're looking at those formative assessments throughout your lesson, when you're looking at them throughout your unit, go ahead and start making those adjustments in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Don't wait until the end of the unit. And then also, again, going back to those systems, like if we have those systems in place, if we're using that learning target that you mentioned earlier to guide us, we're going to be able to know in the course of an activity whether or
Mm-hmm.
not it's going the way that we want it to. And I think it's really, we just got to fine tune our senses, paying attention to those cues so that we know kind of how to adjust in the moment.
I think
So
something that's powerful for us as educators is that we do these things, or a lot of us do these things, or we kind of know that we're supposed to do them in the classroom, but we struggle with applying them to our lives. And so if we take some of those strategies that we use with kids and we apply it to what we do and what happens in our everyday life, then we'll set better boundaries. We will not tie our worth to our work. Um, so that's something else to think about.
100%. Because I mean, the reality is we're going to have good days and we're going to have not so good days. And we have to be okay with kind of that fluctuation. You know, I have referenced this video that I've seen on TikTok where former First Lady Michelle Obama was talking about we have to be okay with being uncomfortable. We have
Mm-hmm.
to be okay with not being like high all the time. And I'm paraphrasing here, but sometimes we feel like, or we expect to always be happy, always be joy filled, always to be on like level 10, and that's unrealistic. So we have to be okay with the kind of ebbs and flows of life.
One thing to piggyback off of that, like you said, you got to be okay with getting uncomfortable. One thing that I like to say a lot is that we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because once we get comfortable with being uncomfortable, then we can push through some of those things that make us uncomfortable.
100%. So again, we know that right now, in the moment in which this is being recorded, we are in the midst of wrapping up the school year, which means testing is not far away from where we are now. And for me anyway, in the schools that I support, it is very stressful. It is very stressful. There's so many things that are going on. And some of it, sidebar, some of it I feel like is us trying to make up for things that we haven't done throughout the year. And not
Mm-hmm.
from a teacher standpoint, but from an administration standpoint, just
Mm-hmm.
trying to make up for things that haven't been done throughout the year. And it can be very, very stressful. So I want to talk about like how can leaders really work to create school cultures that honor teacher wellness without adding more to their plates.
So the first thing that our school leaders can do that's going to help the school culture is they've got to be a model for what that looks like. So we as teachers and educators, or as an instructional coach, I model for my teachers. My teachers model for their students what things are supposed to look like, but our school leaders have to model what boundaries looks like. Maybe that's not contacting your teachers after a certain time, or maybe that's not contacting them before a certain time. Or maybe that's turning your phone off before a certain time. My assistant principal said last week, well, one of my assistant principals said last week, she was like, girl, I need to take my email off my phone. I was like, girl, yes, you do. I took my email off. I had my email on my phone because I went to a conference last summer and I wanted to make sure that the district sent me to. And I forgot to take it off once the conference was over. And it definitely messed with my mental health. And so about 6 months ago, I was like, no, we got to delete, delete. So in order for me to check my email, I got to be real intentional about it. I only check it when I'm on the school internets. I don't check my email at home because that messes with my mental health. And so teachers are like, but I can't reach you after hours. That means you don't need to reach me after hours. That means whatever question you have as a school leader, whatever question you have can wait till tomorrow. And so that's one thing, is just again modeling for teachers what that looks like. And then number two, we have to give them opportunities to tap into that wellness. One thing that my school has started to do, which I really appreciate, is a wellness Wednesdays. And so they will get us a healthy lunch some days. Um, Last week we had tropical smoothie. This week I think they're bringing in, I guess somebody is a paparazzi jewelry person, so they're bringing jewelry for all the teachers to pick out. Little things, but just tapping into and honoring who they are as educators. Also, don't be afraid to shout your teachers out and making them feel like they are a person more than a number. Another thing that our school leaders can do is, I haven't seen this in any of the schools that I've worked in, but I think it's really important not to just ask teachers about their professional goals, ask them about their personal goals too, so that you can start to build that relationship. And if there's anything that you can do to support your teachers with those personal goals or even with their professional goals, then do those things or put them in place to be able to do that things. So if you know, if you have a teacher who um, wants to move into an instructional coaching position, maybe that's her professional goal, then give her opportunities to lead PDs. Give her opportunities to support other teachers, or give her opportunities if you have a coach in your building, then give her opportunities to work alongside with that coach to make sure that she's kind of being nurtured in a way.
So what I'm hearing is leaders can create this culture through just being mindful of when they are communicating with their educators, for one, because there's some school leaders who are sending emails around the clock, and that can be kind of triggering for some people, especially when you do have it on your phone. I, for one, am a person who I don't have any notifications turned on, because I'm a pick and choose when I'm going to respond. I don't got no text message turned on. I don't got no social media turned on. I have nothing turned on. So I have to intentionally go and check whatever it is, and that causes me to miss a lot of social media video shares. But when I get to see them and all this funny stuff is there in my inbox, it makes me feel so good. So leaders, be mindful of when you're sending these emails, the timing of it. Also incorporating a wellness window Wednesday. I love the idea of a healthy lunch, because a lot of times whenever we're ordering stuff, it is not the best for you, which can then make you sluggish. And now you're not helping to kind of bring me up. Another thing that I really like that you said was making them feel good. Like sometimes I think we do things to check a box versus it being super authentic. Something that kind of aligns with that is I'm asking you about your personal goals as well, and then I'm going to create or share opportunities with you that can help you reach them. I think that's a relationship piece. We talk about building a relationship with kids, but we have to also make sure that we're building relationships between the administration and the teachers as well, because the same way that students won't work for you if they don't really like you, I think there's some teachers. Exactly. So if there are any leaders who are listening, kind of keep some of those things in mind. Okay.
Also, let me add to that. Also, just being a listening ear sometimes. Sometimes people just want to just want to they got something on their heart and they just want to get it out. I have a teacher who she just like to talk. And so sometimes I just go and I sit in her class and I just listen to her. And that has made a big difference in our relationship, because sometimes teachers just they got so much going on and they just need to get it out.
For sure. For sure. I have a teacher like that too. She can talk, baby. Let me tell you. She had me on that phone for hours. I'm like, okay, I'm putting up my boundary. We done hit an hour and a half now. I'm about to go ahead and cut you off, girl.
This lady, she has told me multiple times, you are like free therapy. And girl, I just listen. Yes, just listen to them sometimes.
A listening ear can go a long way.
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely.
All right. So, what mindset shifts are essential to building sustainable rhythms?
So, some of the mindset shifts that are essential to building sustainable rhythms throughout the school year are number one, again, remembering that failure is feedback. And so, for many of us, we're not used to failing because we don't fail. And so, it's hard when we do. So, just remember that. Another mindset shift that we need to make is that fear is our friend. So, I like this one because so many of us are scared to step out and to do things. So we talked about professional goals and having our administrators, help teachers tap into that. But if the teacher is too scared to step into that role, then they're not going to do that. So we've got to make fear. We have to look at fear as our friend instead of a foe. That's what I say. Fear is your friend and it's not a foe. There's a book called Fear is My Homeboy. And so when you start to think of, there's a article and it talks about the ways to fuel friendships. And so when we take those 6 ways to fuel friendships and attach it to building our friendship with our fear, then we start to not become fearless because we don't, the goal is not to become fearless. The goal is to fear more, but to get past the things that we're afraid of. Another mindset shift that is going to be essential again is that your worth is not tied to your work. We are worth much more than the work that we put out. So those are three that I think are essential for the school year. Also, building sustainable systems. We have to have systems in place.
Okay, so when we're talking about those mindset shifts, you mentioned something about that thinking about that failure is bad. So you mentioned earlier that failure is obviously feedback. I think the reason why we look at failure in a negative light is because we've been conditioned to believe that we should just be able to get things right. Like
Yeah.
I should be able to, for example, when we talk about math, we have math people, they say, then we have people who aren't math people. And the people who they consider math people are those who can hear something or do something and they immediately get it. I don't think that that is a good way to even be interacting with mathematics or really any subject for that matter, because that's
Well,
just not reality.
when it comes to math, like we need people. Number one, if you're a person, you got to do math every day anyway. So you are a math person. However, when it comes to math, like we have to help teachers and students think more flexibly about numbers. And some that's not going to always come like that. Sometimes that's going to take, sitting with something a little bit longer, or sometimes that's going to take, working it out in different ways. That's why I love math so much because there are different ways to solve a problem, and we get to be creative and unique in the ways that we solve those problems.
100%. The other thing you mentioned is fear is our friend. And I was listening to you and I said, you know what? She's right. Because when I think about the times in which I am scared, I usually use that as a motivation. So, for
Hmm.
example, if I do a lot of professional development. So every time it's time for me to go up, there's always some nerves. There's
Hmm.
always my temperature rising, I'm sweating, but that's like my motivation to do really well. Whenever we are within some type of professional development that I am participating in, and they're
Hmm.
asking for volunteers to speak, even though I might be nervous to speak, I always volunteer to speak first. Like that's kind of my thing. Like I'm trying to face my fear or my anxiety head on because I feel
Hmm.
like it's going to make me stronger on the end. And it usually does. It
Hmm.
usually does. Yep. Okay.
Um,
So
in that article, one of the first things they say is that one of the ways to build a friendship with somebody is accumulation, meaning you got to accumulate the amount of time. You got to spend more time with those people, that person, to really build that deep relationship with them. So when it comes to fear, we have to spend more time with our fear and doing the things that scare us so that we can conquer, if you will, those fears, which is just what you were talking about. So yes, that is something that you are afraid of. However, by doing it, you slowly build your muscle to get past that. for me, it's public speaking. I hate public speaking. However, I look for opportunities to do more public speaking so that it becomes easier.
Absolutely. And I also learned that the opposite of that is also true. So if there's something that I'm scared of, the more that I avoid it, the more fearful I become of that thing. So yeah, you're hitting all the things. So are there any small routines or habits that you've seen help teachers reclaim time or energy?
I love this question, okay, because this goes back to those systems that we were talking about. So you have a morning routine. Well, most of us have a morning routine in the mornings. Most of us have an evening routine in the evening. I think first, starting with those two things, when it comes to a morning routine, my the thing that I like to say is when it comes to your morning routine, what are the things that I need to do that are going to help me have my sanity throughout the day? And those are the things that I put into my mornings. Same thing with my evening routine is what do I need to do to make sure I get a good night's sleep? So is that drinking some sleepy time tea? Is that reading a book? Is that turning on music? Whatever it is that I need to do at home to make life easier for me. But just like we have a morning routine and an evening routine at home, we need to have that in the school building too. What do you need to start your day with in order to really get yourself mentally prepared for the day? We cannot get ourselves mentally prepared for the day if we're supposed to be at school at 3:20 in the, or excuse me, 7:20 in the bell ring at 7:25. You're not giving yourself enough of a runway. So if the building opens, no, I'm not gonna say if the building opens. If the bell rings at 7:45, you're gonna need at least 10 minutes to just even go in there and sit. If you're running in the door trying to make copies and get yourself in order to start your day, then I don't know about you, but that brings like a sense of anxiety to me when I'm late. So I try to make sure, and I tell teachers to try to make sure that you give yourself enough time to come in. I have one teacher who what she does now is that she'll come in, she'll lock her door, she'll put her privacy or not privacy curtain, but the safety curtain, she'll put that down, she'll turn the lights off, and she'll just play some music, some calming music just to get her day started. So she's more centered and more grounded to start her day. Also, I would pick 2 to 3 days, 2, 3 max, where you decide that you're going to stay after a certain time. But give yourself some time and pick a day or two, preferably more than that, where you're going to leave whenever your contract is over. So my contract is over at 3:20. So I'm going to pick 2 to 3 days where at 3:20, I'm going to see y'all later. That's the boundary. The other days, you can decide, hey, maybe I have something I need to do, so I'm going to stay an extra hour. For me, I need timers. So I'm going to set a timer for that hour. And when that timer goes off, I'm going to pack up my stuff and I'm out the door. Another one would be, I don't know if you've heard of the Pomodoro technique, but I use Pomodoro like nobody's business. That has helped me so much. It's 30 minutes on, it's 5 minutes off. 30 minutes on, 5 minutes off. And that 5 minutes off is not me sitting in the same location playing on my phone. That is me getting up and moving a little bit um, before I sit back down for another 30 minutes of focus time. Another thing that has helped me and so a few other people I know is to create a power hour in your day. So let's say you have lesson plans that you want to get done for the week, create a power hour. This is my lesson plan and power hour. I'm going to sit here, I'm going to focus on this for 1 hour. And then when that hour goes off or when that hour is done, I'm done with this task. So those are some things that you can build into your school day. Also, don't eat lunch in the teacher's lounge. Find a spot outside, if it's not raining, if your school has a courtyard or wherever, where you can just sit and be at peace and be still. Because there'll be some negative energy in the teacher's lounge. And we don't need that.
I used to always eat my lunch in my room.
Yeah.
That was a little antisocial, but you're right. Oftentimes there was a lot of negative energy, teachers talking about students, and I just didn't want to be a part of that.
Mhm.
And I also, that was my time to decompress, kind of get my mind right for my next set of classes anyway. You were mentioning something that made me think of Atomic Habits. And that is one of my favorite books. I think I've read it now twice or at least two and a half times. And he talks about habit stacking. So if
Mhm.
there's something that you want to get done, you put it behind something that you know you're going to do, and it allows you to kind of do it because you're going to get into that rhythm that we kind of talked about a little bit earlier. So if you guys have not read Atomic Habits, I encourage you to check that out because it would allow you to kind of think about how can I create my systems so that I am as productive as I need to be
Mhm.
without creating that overwhelm for yourself. Now, I want to talk about your end of year reflection, yours. What does
Okay.
it look like? And then I want to think, how can people borrow from what you're doing?
So for the in my end of the year reflection process, I think about a couple of things. Number one, thinking about the year as a whole, what went well. Okay. Second thing I like to think about is what didn't go so well. And the third thing, I then think about going into the next year, what do I need to improve upon? Or looking at the list of things that went well, how can I make them better? Looking at the things that didn't go well, how can I improve upon them for the upcoming school year?
What advice would you give teachers who want to approach next school year with more harmony, less hustle?
So this is the perfect time to think about it because now that we are getting ready to get into the summer, you have the opportunity right now to start thinking about those systems that you want to build in the next school year. Start getting your morning routines together now. Start getting your evening routine together now. Start just mentally preparing yourself for the next school year. I don't recommend spending your entire summer doing work because I know I used to be that person. So there are people out there. I was not teaching summer school, but I was at home working too hard all summer long. So get your rest now, but also make sure that you have the systems in place now for the next school year. Again, in the morning, in the evenings, start thinking about the boundaries that you're going to put in place. And then I know for some of us, and this is me, um, like the planning part super easy. It's the execution that gets some of us. So go ahead and start thinking about what it is that you're going to do in the new school year and how are you going to be successful? Who do you need to help hold you accountable once the new school year starts so that you are experiencing that flow and we're letting hustle go.
Absolutely. In May, I talked to teachers about making time to reflect before the school year is up. So
Oh,
hopefully
mm,
finding some time in those teacher work days to sit down with your teammates, sit down with your grade level. You could even sit down with your department and talk about some of those things that you mentioned earlier. What went well? What are some things that we would like to improve to ensure that it does not happen again next year? So that way, if you already kind of did that reflection before you left school while it's still fresh on your mind, in the
mhm.
summertime, it's more so now, like you said, just putting the things in place so that you can be even more successful. So, and you've already mentioned this a little bit earlier, just how can we be intentional with our summer and using it to reset? You know, you've talked about let's not use your whole summer to work, but I want to get into more as we wrap up our conversation mental, emotional, and spiritually. How can educators intentionally use the summer to reset?
So, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, listen, the school year is difficult for a lot of us, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So, when I think about mentally resetting, I think about finding your favorite podcasts or finding some of those things that mentally you need to do that are going to help you to take your mind off of the school year. A lot of educators, because we care so much for our kids, we struggle with compassion fatigue, and that can hit hard especially during the school year. So take some time this summer to reset that. Yes, you care about your kids and you care about what's going on with them during the summer, but at the same time, think about what it is that you need. There is no better time than the summer to prioritize ourselves, to not just set, but to realign with our goals and to make sure that what we're doing in the new school year is going to help us to align with what it is that we say that we want, or what it is that we say we want to do. I also recommend as a reset is to do a guided visualization. Just go to YouTube and type in guided visualization for a reset or for just knowing what it is that you want. I want to go back to that because when we don't realize what it is that we want, that's when we start to make choices that are not in alignment with who we were created to be. So do that guided visualization. Really give yourself the opportunity to see yourself in the next 1, 3, 5, 10, and 20 years. And then start to see and where you can put in place the things that you need to put in place to make those visualizations come true. So those are some things that you can do this summer to reset. Again, make sure you have your routines in place, and that you're building the systems that are going to help you to sustain you this school year in the upcoming.
Thank you so much, Carmen. I really appreciate our time together. I want to include, I'm going to go to YouTube to look up guided visualization so that I can include a link to one in the show notes. And then once you have that example, then you can kind of build from there to find something that kind of best fits you. I also would love to include a link to the article that you referenced. So if you don't mind sharing that with me so I can share that with the people as well. And then obviously I'll share the link to Atomic Habits so you guys can check that out as well. As this school year wraps up, remember, work-life harmony isn't a myth, it's a mindset. It's about naming what matters most, creating systems that honor your limits, and knowing that rest is not a reward, it's a right. Thank you, Carmen, for reminding us that we don't have to earn permission to care for ourselves. And to every educator listening, you are more than your productivity. You are more than your profession. This summer, make space for joy, clarity, and whatever your soul has been craving. We'll see you next time on PD for the Soul. That's a wrap for this episode of PD for the Soul. But before you go, don't forget to grab your copy of Season 2's digital companion journal and coloring book. It's designed to help you slow down, process what you're hearing, and bring more intention to how you show up in and out of the classroom. Whether you're reflecting poolside or in between PD sessions, this is your space to reset with purpose. And if you want to catch me live this summer, I'll be at Hive in Orlando, Florida from July 14th to 17th, and I'll be facilitating Summer PD in Cumberland County during the last week of July. Ready to learn and you want to learn with me? Come check us out, okay? If you want more details and more soul-fueled support, make sure you're subscribed to the newsletter. You'll get all the updates, resources, and behind-the-scenes looks delivered straight to your inbox. And as always, when you hear something that resonates with you, don't be shy. Share it with a colleague. Take some time to rate us so that you can get us in front of more people so we can share more of what we're doing here together. As always, I appreciate you for taking the time to engage with me, okay? And I hope that you got something from today's episode. Until next time, keep making math happen.